Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Just Hang. I am your host, Pastor Jake Gibson. Like always, the goal of Just Hang is to give you a real hangout experience, all while discussing a topic that could provide substance and value to your own life. On today's episode, I'm going to be joined by my friends and fellow pastors, Joel and Jonathan. These guys are the hosts of the What the Flock and the Music of Life Church podcast. Our focus today is going to be the foundation of their season 5 journey, truth. You know, a buzz phrase and a relevant topic that's being talked about in our culture today is this idea of your truth or my truth. We're going to talk about how this relates to the theme for season 5 for these podcasts, God's will. Have you ever wondered, asked, or even tried to answer one of life's biggest questions? Why am I here? Well, we're going to discuss that and more on another episode today of Just Hang. An art form that's missing in most of our culture today is the ability for a group of people to gather together for impacting and meaningful conversation. Conversations where we talk about our hopes, our dreams, our fears, our failures, and maybe even our issues. Throughout my entire life, it was the people that made safety a priority. Those people that allowed me to be me, that helped these conversations to be life-changing. We invite you to kick back, relax, and just hang. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Just Hang. Glad to have you along. How's it going?
Wonderful.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks, Jake.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you guys. You're just off season 5 of your podcast, the God's Will season. Quite a season indeed. Any words or anything you guys have to summarize your thoughts or feelings about season 5?
Yeah, quite the challenge at times, but also what a great season. I mean, really, some of the episodes and some of the mini series we did in that season were stuff that Jonathan and I were learning a lot about while we were preparing and recording those episodes. So it felt like a season where almost as much learning stuff as we were sharing, like we have in the previous seasons.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It took a little while for me to really understand what we were talking about early on in the season. And then as we went, things started to get clear. So it reminded me of a lot of, I'm sure, what our listeners feel maybe the first time they hear these principles and these definitions, where it's a little bit of a shock. It's a little bit of a, wait, how am I going to remember all of these definitions? Or this is very different than what I thought it was. So being able to get some definitions, and it was learning those words was really, it was challenging, but you stick with it. And then all of a sudden it just opens up a whole new world for you. It is like very much like learning a language. You know, my wife and I are getting ready to go on vacation in Italy. And so I'm brushing up on my Italian, and the more you practice it, the more you listen to it. It takes a few times. And then, but once you get it, it's like, wow, it starts to slow down. Things start to make sense. And that is very much how we reference doctrine, where it's like the Bible doesn't seem so like a jumbled mess of someone going when you read it, you know? So it was a great season. Really helped me out a lot.
Yeah, and you guys started off season 5 with a pretty big topic in truth and deception. I think you even referred to it as a banger episode or a banger topic to cover. You guys talk a lot about this, the things that you've learned and the things that you've uncovered. Do you have a sense that, as you're starting to talk about this topic, you're talking about truth, right? We know that God is the source of all truth. You're starting to talk about God's will, that, you guys are positioning yourselves in a place where you're starting to hear even more from God as you're doing
these episodes?
Oh yeah, I think there's, you know, a lot of the doctrine that we're teaching is stuff that is largely missed in the church. And I think when people really grab a hold of it, I think it pleases God, and he's really quick to respond then. So I think one of the ways God encourages us and brings confirmation that we're on the right path is by, you know, bringing this confirmation, by bringing this encouragement, by bringing this blessing, by speaking to us more often and in deeper areas. So I think that's what Jonathan and I are experiencing a lot is, you know, you're on this path, you wonder if you're doing God's will. God's really quick to confirm that when you are, and he's even quicker to show you when you're not. So yeah, I think it's just like the further we've gotten into this podcast, the more seasons we've done, the closer we've gotten to the heart of God. And I think God is quick to show you when he's pleased with what you're doing. So that's what I'd attribute it to, is he's just bringing us confirmation.
Yeah, and I think I think it does increase our ability to hear him, but it doesn't mean that his voice feels louder.
Yeah, it doesn't. No.
No, and it doesn't mean that oftentimes, like, it seems like what we hear is a lot different than what we maybe have heard before, or maybe that like what we're expecting. So I think as like if you interact with a lot of new believers, sometimes God seems really loud and he's moving in really fast and big ways. And I think as you pursue God more, um he is still speaking all the time. It's just very soft. And our process needs to refine in order to hear God's voice, which is where again this doctrine is really important.
Yeah.
To understand this language, because he's going to talk quieter as time goes on, because he goes, do you want to hear me? You know, do you want to hear
Wow.
me more? So it is absolutely logical for God to speak softer and softer and softer, so that we are continually chasing his influence in our life.
Yeah. So hearing his voice more clearly doesn't mean it's louder. That's a good distinction.
Right. It
His
doesn't mean that
voice,
all of a
yeah.
sudden he's bang, like
No.
super loud in your face. There he is. That's obviously God. It takes a little bit of discernment. And I think it takes, it's so different that it takes a community to basically be able to sort it out. It takes a counsel, it takes a friend, it takes, a spouse to sort out these words that you get from God, to make sure that it's making sense what God wants me to do. And I think you do become aware, in the topic of truth and deception, just how easy it is to be deceived.
Mm.
You get,
Oh yeah.
an incredible, seemingly revelatory piece of information that no one knows, or is not widely known, then you think, oh, that must be from God. And you can just run with it without knowing why or how to deliver that message.
Yeah.
So it can become increasingly more and more important to slow down and understand what it is that you're hearing from God, and have some proofs that keep you safe as you do hear from him.
Nice. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think our churches, as we all kind of pastor a uniquely different group of people, we all run these people who have definitely been deceived as they've tried to pursue truth. In your experiences as pastors, how have you seen people the most widely deceived? Specific areas, topics, things like that.
Well, I mean, I'll go right to a really big area, and I could just share my own perspective of this. I remember when I first learned what God's nature was, I had a difficult time with letting go of not the fact that God's right and just. That wasn't too hard for me to grasp because I had never really heard a better description than that. But the thing that was hard for me to let go was how he's right and just, which is really what the church would tell you is he's sovereign, he's all powerful, right? He can do anything, he's in complete control. And if that doesn't make sense to you, then that's okay because it's not supposed to. We're not supposed to understand this stuff. It's a mystery. But so for me, I remember a vivid moment where I was like still battling my belief about God, and I remember saying out of my mouth, "Yeah, I believe God is right and just, but I also believe he still can do everything. He still knows everything that will happen in the future down to the minute detail of every decision that will ever be made. And he is in complete control. He just allows certain things to happen. And that was my justification to, yeah, I understand God's right and just, but I'm still going to hold on to this wrong how and why. And what's the proof that is deception is the source of that was just, I mean, I wouldn't have even been able to tell you, why do you believe that, Joel? And it would have just, but my answer to that, I don't even know. I probably would have just done some distracting move to try to get out from under even having to answer the question. Well, I don't know where I heard it from, or it's just what I was told. That's what it means that he's God. Some rationalization or justification. So I think that is a very common thing that is prevalent in the church. Is we often don't come across people who fight us on saying that God's right and just. What they fight us in is us saying that that's the definition of God, that that's his causes or his nature. And what they really fight us on is the sovereignty and the all-powerful, the omnipotent, the traditional definition of omnipotent. So that where that's the hardest thing for people to let go of. And I think it's just because what's been ingrained in our heads is that's the definition of God. If we've created a God in our own image, a God that we would want to be. I want to be all powerful. I have described this God that I think would be God according to what I want the most. And it really just comes down to being in control and being able to make things happen the way I want them to happen, which is a very human trait. So that's one of the glaring deceptions people have is this, like I believe in God as a right what, but an inability to explain how and why he's God, how and why that works, how and why he moves is the deception. There's either no answer to that or the answer is wrong most of the time.
Yeah. I love that. That's such a great answer, Joel. I mean, for me, I just gotta. I agree with one of the points that Joel made about this idea of embracing the mystery. And that we can't know certain things. We don't know everything. We I don't know how God spoke creation. I don't know how, like, he said, let there be light, but then there was light. But yeah, cool. Awesome. Yeah, I know that. But how did he do that? How do those sound waves translate into light? I have no idea. So there are things that I don't understand and I don't know and I can't explain yet. However, there are things that I can explain. So I think one of the biggest deceptions out there that's hurting the church is, what are we labeling as a mystery?
Oh yeah.
What are we labeling as something we can understand and something we can't understand?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we, like Pastor Joel said, why can't we understand the nature of God as human beings? Why would that not be an answer that is completely like rational and important and makes a lot of sense for us to know so that we can worship the right God now? Like, that makes sense. Or these definitions of truth or deception. understanding those words and what they mean. So I think that it's very deceptive when people are quick to say we're human beings, we're finite, and we cannot
Yeah.
understand
Mm.
certain things.
Yeah.
And which is really, kind of at the heart of what our podcast is about.
Totally.
You can understand the ultimate answer for these things. Every time we do a show, we give an answer, something that can be understood.
Yeah.
And the traditional perspective, the strict perspective, and the loose perspective will both eventually get to the same place of we can't know that, or you can't know that. Jake,
Mm.
you can't know that. You're too young. You can't know that, Joel. You haven't been a doctor of theology for X many years, whatever rationalization they come up with.
That's been that's a very freshman perspective, was one that was actually said to me when I was just starting in seminary. Yeah. And there is no gray area. There's no mercy given
Yep.
to us when we explain what we explain to these religious authorities who are bullying. It's either we can't know anything for sure, or it's if you guys think you know something and think you can explain something clearly and think you have the right definition behind one of these hard to understand concepts, then what you're really saying is you know everything. That's what we're accused of. It's either you don't know anything, or really what you're saying is you know everything. And what Jonathan said is perfect. Like, no, we're not saying we know everything. I'm saying I know God's nature. And I'm also saying I'm open to you proving me wrong in that area. But there's no mercy. It's the complete judgment of either you have an inability to understand these because it's a mystery, or you know what, you're arrogant to even think you could. And that's a shame. That's a shame. It is a stumbling block being put in the path of believers.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah, and it's that stumbling block that causes a ton of pain.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it causes these people, because I was one of those people that was just like, you know what, if I can't know these things, I can't have these answers, then what's the point? And just living life like, yeah, there are these mountaintops and there are these valleys, and it's going to be constant ups and downs, and that's just the way it's going to be. And what a deception, and I fear for how many people that are actually living that type of mentality.
Unfortunately, a lot of times that's the best answer somebody can give to even just bring you some encouragement, is like, yeah, I guess we just have to learn to deal with it. That's unfortunate because it's a really crappy answer.
Right. And it's worse than being able to just say, I don't know why that is the way that it is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So in your process of doing these podcasts, the process of uncovering, this truth, I'm assuming this is kind of how you guys, really came about a process for intentionally helping people. You mentioned, in the shows, your restoration process. So was that really the formulation of the restoration process? This, uncovering this truth, putting it together, seeing how it's helping people's lives. Can you talk a little bit more about that specifically?
Yeah. A lot of this ability to know that what truth is, and also how to determine truth, is the key to really uncovering the doctrine of the Bible that works. So we like to say doctrine works. When you have doctrine, it works. It's transformative, it's renewing, it's restorative, it's reparative. It does it heals us mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And really that's the key to understanding any text. But with the tools for determining truth, everybody uses some set of tools to interpret text when they're reading. We all have it, whether we're aware of it or not. all we've done with season 5, the first 5 episodes in particular, is give away those tools that work every time when you use them together. And that's been the key. Is like when now you start interpreting a text outside of the text. You need principles that work outside of the text to be able to apply to it while you're reading. That's why the Bible is so hard to understand, is when people don't have great interpretation skills and they just read, and you're just reading and you're confused, and it might take 5, 10, 15 times of reading the Bible before you start grabbing a hold of it.
Yep.
But what we've learned is that when you have the right tools of interpretation, which in seminary, in the scholarly context, this is called hermeneutics. This is basic hermeneutics. And what we covered in the first 5 episodes is the principal basis of doing the right method of hermeneutics, of interpreting text. And what you end up finding out is that everything we are doing with helping people has come through a process of reading the Bible the way God intended us to read it, in a way that helps us understand it today. And through that, we've been able to glean and discern specific principles that we've just kind of put in a certain row that have helped people in certain areas of their lives, including restoration, which is really the restoration process we use from the Bible is really, if you listen to the laborers episode from the previous season, that's really what we're doing at Music Life Church. It's an intentional process of developing and training laborers, the laborers that Jesus told us to pray for. So all this stuff is in the Bible, but it's not, the Bible is really, as we talk about in season 5, the Bible is 66 books that really do make this really big overarching story when you read it the right way. And so there isn't a book that's called the Letter of Restoration where it just lines out this process that you can use. But if you have the tools for determining truth, you can interpret the Bible in a way where all of these things just start becoming in high definition to you. And what I mean by that is they're able to be applied to your life today, thousands of years after those books were written.
It's such a good answer, Joel. I think we did come across the principles of restoration. That's why oftentimes we'll say it's not our process, it's the Bible's process.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's hard to claim your stamp on something that is like it was discovered, it wasn't invented.
Right.
Right. So here's what I think, Jake. I actually think that every successful Christian program that people go through, any sort of discipleship program, anything like that, is going to touch on some level of justice, mercy, forgiveness, and love to help someone learn how to basically not cause a mess in all of these situations. And when people shoot for things like becoming a disciple of Christ, well, if you become a disciple of Christ, you most certainly need to bear your own burden and not be a disaster. Or if you are a disaster, you respond by, confessing and repenting and handling those situations well. So my point would be every single Christian program that helps someone get in control of their life so that they can give up control to God is going to reference justice, mercy, forgiveness, and love, but maybe not that explicitly like we can do it because of what Joel said, which is the doctrine. Because we have these 4 principles, it causes us to look into the Bible and go, okay, what are these principles that is causing that character in the Bible to not go back in the hole? Or what is causing that person? What is Joseph doing in prison that is causing him to be blessed and rise up in the ranks of Egypt.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
What is this guy doing? And you take these 4 principles and you bang. What you do is you use that on that character. And then you go, wait a minute. This guy is embracing justice.
Yeah.
Whoa, he is cleaving to the fact that God sees him.
Yeah.
He's not, and he's showing people mercy. He's not lashing out. He's forgiving. And he most certainly is loving God throughout all of this. And we see this character, wherever he is, he gets blessed. So I think people do that in a lot of Christian programs. And I think they'll be successful if they can do that and if they can narrow into it. We just have, because of those 4 principles, like I said, and Joel just said, it's more high definition.
Yeah, a lot more effective and efficient, right?
Yeah,
Where
exactly.
I think there is some, the church has a long history, and I think there's certain things that the church does right, and without the right modeling tools, it's hard to find out where the cause is to what they did was right. So what you end up doing is, if I prayed over somebody for healing and it worked,
Nice.
and it took me an hour to pray for that person, and I don't know why the prayer worked, then what I end up doing is replicating the entire hour of praying. And now what I've done is I've taken an effect and made it a cause. I said, now we have to pray an hour every time I heal somebody. And then you do that over centuries and centuries of tradition, over all these different areas where you help people. And that's why sometimes it'll take 1.5 years or 2 years to bring somebody through a leadership course. It's like, does it really have to take 2 years? Probably not. It works because probably for 3 months of that 2 years, you're hitting the right stuff sporadically in certain areas. What we've done, what these, non-contradiction, contrastive thinking, growth-minded, and causality, what these tools that determine truth do, is they help you model out what are the right pieces within the Bible that will work every time. And it makes, I think one of the episodes we may have even talked about, Martin Luther said, I was really busy. I have a lot going on today, so I'm going to have to pray an extra 2 hours or whatever, the famous quote. And my thought was always like, man, why, do you not know how to pray the right way? Like, why do you have to pray so long? I'm not saying you shouldn't pray long, but if you know the right way to pray, you should be able to be more effective and efficient with your prayers and not have to be, why does it have to take that long? I think that same concept works on all levels. Like, the first rendition of restoration that we had, even before Music of Life Church started, was just a lot of Jonathan and other leaders in our church meeting with people every week, just trying different things out. And sometimes meeting with people every week for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years. And what you end up having is, we start a church and we want to be intentional about fulfilling the mission God's given us. So how can we take what these guys have learned for all these years of all this coaching and pastoring and scale it down to a process that anybody could go through? And that hopefully doesn't take 2 or 3 years for a person to go through. So that's really what we did, is we used those principles of determining truth to take all this experience we had, turn it into understanding, find the causes, the doctrine, and now it works for everybody. And it doesn't take Jonathan meeting with 12 people or 23 people a week. Where you're getting like 23 phone calls a week at one time.
I was, yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
Jonathan.
meeting for like 2 hours at a time, just to
right. So you're talking,
sort it out,
this is almost 50 hours a week of just meeting with people. To now we have a team of restoration coaches who are all teaching the same doctrinal information with their own experiences and stories added onto it. But the doctrine is the same that everybody's learning. It takes 10 to 12 weeks, no matter who you are. It's because we've gotten it down to the doctrine of what it takes to develop a laborer. But yeah, I mean, that's the power of these tools that determine truth, is they help you get down to the spiritual causes of whatever issue you're dealing with.
Absolutely. That's awesome. So, one of the things you guys talked about in that first episode, in the truth episode, was this idea, and it's culturally, it's kind of a big topic right now, but this idea of your truth and my truth, and really trying to corner the market on truth and figure out what the right answers are. Any thoughts that you have on why people spend so much time and effort trying to determine what's their truth compared to what the truth is for somebody else? What are they trying for? What's the deeper thing that they're trying for?
I mean, I'll answer, and I think that people, when they say my truth, I think what they're talking about is how things work and resonate with their uniqueness and who they are. Like how to speak to someone based upon their uniqueness, talking to someone the way that you want to be spoken to. So a lot of times people call that, well, my truth. For example, there might be someone out there that doesn't mind being told what to do if they want to do it. You know what I mean? Hey, Joel, go read a book. Joel, read a book this week. And Joel would be like, cool. Whereas, and that you could say, well, that's Joel's truth.
Yeah.
Joel's truth is that he wants to be spoken to that way. Whereas it's my truth, I don't want to be spoken to that way. I don't want someone to tell me what to do in really any area in my life. That's my truth. Really, what I feel like people are talking about is their uniqueness. How do
Okay.
you want someone to interact with you and your uniqueness? And how we operate is according to our uniqueness. What gives me energy? That's a lot of what people mean by my truth, too, is it gives me energy when people share with me how they're feeling. So come on, my truth is to share how I feel and for everyone to share their truth with me. And what can happen is that me living my truth causes and is really me wanting other people to not live their truth to adjust to my truth. So I want you to all share your feelings with me and tell me how you're doing, and I'll tell you what my feelings are and how I'm doing. And there we go. We're all happy, right? And a bunch of people are like, Jonathan, you suck. I hate talking to that guy because
I
he's
don't do
waving it
that.
like it's his truth flag. He wants everybody to adjust to him, right? So that's what I think it is. I think it's people are confusing what their truth is with what energizes them and what is according to their uniqueness. And as we've talked about in previous seasons, your truth, the truth of who you are is, let's go da 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 boom 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 all the way down to your motivational spiritual gifts, to who God has made you to be. That who are you level. And the truth is that God has made us all unique.
Yeah.
So it's not my truth or your truth. The truth is God has made us uniquely. So what energizes or what drains us is completely unique. So that's what I think people mean by my truth.
Yeah, that's awesome. I agree. I think it comes down to identity and how we identify with ourselves, which is big. There is this intrinsic feeling we all have. Everybody knows that they're different. One of the things we teach uniqueness, and that is one of these things no one denies. Everybody knows they're different. The big issue is, why don't we treat everybody like they're different? We want to be treated according to how we're unique, but we don't take that extra step, that backward step of recognizing, well, then that means everybody I interact with needs to be interacted with according to who they are, which is really the point Jonathan's making here. But there is, we don't have to be taught that we have some unique, special thing within us, that we are different. And one of the things we've experienced over the years is that people who know who they are and are making progress in that aren't depressed. So this goes to show there is a contradiction, these big contradictions in these very foundational areas in our thought process are the ones that lead to depression. And one of the biggest contradictions people have is when they're assigning something to who they are, their identity, that's not actually in accordance with who they were created to be. That's a major contradiction that your unconscious brain wants to get your attention in. Not because it's a bummer, but because it's like, whoa, we are running this car the wrong way. We need to stop and fix it. And so really that's the way I see this is everybody's looking for that answer. Everybody's looking for that answer. So my truth is I think it's a way of getting people off my back. If I say it's my truth, it tends to get people to be like, all right, now you can't argue with whatever I say, right? So I think it is a deflection technique. But really at the core of it, it comes down to people searching for, who am I? That's a question we all need to answer. And it's one of the most important questions that we need to answer. Second only to who is God.
Yeah, that's amazing. I just want to add, what's interesting about the idea of someone having their truth. I would like to unlump with what causes you to feel valued and cared for versus what is truth. Okay? A lot of times people have those things lumped. If something is the truth, then it means that it's valuable to me or it's according to what I value. When honestly, for me in my life and how I live, sometimes what I value is different than the truth.
Yeah,
Interesting.
And the things that I value that are not of the truth wind up getting me hurt very, very badly.
Yeah.
And that's when I go, ouchie, that's wrong. I better stop doing what gives me immediate gratification or energy or makes me feel valued and start pursuing the truth. Because honestly, the truth is immovable. It doesn't care if I believe it or not. That's the difference. My truth is there is, in my opinion, there's no such thing as my truth. And if I could have a magic wand, then it would be, all right, everybody, let's unlump these concepts of what you like or what you value or what's unique to you and what is truth. Because the truth is actually one of the most ununique things out there. Because what is truth is what has been present since really the foundation of the world, going back to the very nature of God and who he is and how that has not changed. So there's me, all flexible human being, and then there's the truth that is the immovable rock that doesn't really care or it doesn't need me to believe in it for it to be truth or not.
Right. Yeah, that's good.
So my and truth are two different things.
Yeah.
So it's this, this idea of people are trying to gain this energy and they're not energized. And you guys mentioned before this idea of, asking these really big questions. And I think one of those questions that we didn't necessarily touch on yet, but I want to go to is this idea of, in line with God's will. So many people ask this question: why am I here? And it's really this process of understanding, uncovering truth that really starts that process of being able to answer that question. It does start first with that uniqueness, and then being able to journey towards that thing. In my church, what we recently have been referring to God's will as is his dream for our life. It's kind of this really nice way of trying to take this big idea and bring it down to this storytelling church, make it safe for everybody to experience. But how do you as pastors help a person answer that question, to be able to discover and understand God's will or God's dream for their life?
Well, I have them listen to season 5 of What the Flock. That's one of the things I do. That's a great starting point. But ultimately, for me, a lot of this comes back to starting with understanding who I am, and then understanding who God is. So there is, so like before we, again, back in the early days when we were helping people, one of the main ways that we helped people with mental and emotional issues and were like mental health issues, all these, depression, anxiety, and all that stuff, was simply God's nature and salvation. And when you understand those two things, really what you're understanding is who is God, and then who am I? And salvation is like the bridge between those two things. Christ created that bridge. Once we receive him, now how I interact with God and how he interacts with me based on who he created me to be is the big start of that entire journey. So that's where I start. Where I start with people is, let's just, and it's really, do they want to understand who God is first? They want to understand who they are first? Whatever journey they want to go on, eventually it all goes back to truth. It all goes back to, really, the key comes back to, do you have an ability to hear from God? Do you know how he works? Which again comes down to doctrine. It all comes down to doctrine, and not just knowing doctrine, but allowing ourselves to embrace God's doctrine to the point where it helps us hear from him and take direction from him better. Now, as far as getting into the specifics of helping somebody understand what God's will is for their life, we're going to need a lot more time than this interview to get into. But where it starts is really, who is God? Who are you? Do you have an ability to hear from him? And what's your plan to continue to grow in that?
It's amazing. And all I will do is add to that answer. So, which is cool, because it's who is me? What's, we talked about my truth and combine and separating those two concepts. So it's a really cool segue. You need to find out who you are. Who am I? Discover who you are. And then get this truth. Start living according to this truth, and start doing this truth, and start getting that truth in you. And then, like Joel was saying, you're going to hear from God more clearly. Then what? I'll give you one more step. What do you think you should do with those two pieces as you learn these things? Okay. What do you think is an opportunity that you have to practice and try and learn something according to who you are and according to what you understand is the truth? And I would say, go do that.
Yeah, that's good.
Go do that thing. Okay. Yeah. Now, I don't think there is anyone who can philosophize. When I say philosophize, I mean just sit there and ponder. I wonder what my purpose is. I've discovered it.
Right.
I've discovered my purpose by myself in my room, pondering for hours and hours and hours, of doing research and studying and all of that alone. No. I think purpose is discovered when you live your uniqueness with God's community, with the place where his truth is made to live and thrive and flourish. So one of the best things that I believe someone can do is, you want to discover your purpose? Well, who are you? And how can you use that in the church?
Yeah.
Because church ought to be the perfect place for you to make mistakes and practice, because you're surrounded by people, hopefully the safest people in the world. Oftentimes not the case, but hopefully the safest people in the world that will help you be able to try different things and learn what it is that you do. And I think that as you practice that, and as you learn that, and as you discover, hey, I like this about doing this role in church, and I don't like this about this role. Awesome. Well, that's amazing. Now, how can we continue to refine what it is that you do and what it is that you're going for and what it is that your purpose is. Because I always say that your purpose is your art. It's your unique, your unique. So it's uniqueness, your unique expression of truth.
Yeah.
That's your art. And you have to do it. You have to create it. You have to express it towards others to refine it. You know, I cannot sit in my room and just play my guitar and write songs by myself and truly refine my gift. I got to get out there on stage and sing a really bad song in front of people.
Yeah.
And go, oh, I like this about that song and I don't like this about that song, you know? So
yeah, man, great answer.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think therein lies the biggest struggle is, you know, because it takes a certain amount of confidence to go out there and be willing to try and
To
fail.
risk, yeah.
And it's a risk. It's definitely, but without risk, you know, there's not the reward.
Right.
So for the listener, as we close the hangout out right now, for the listener who is sitting here going, man, yeah, I want to do that step. I need more help with that step. What advice would you give them in their own life? What direction, what resources would you have available for them?
I mean, legitimate, like I'm hoping they're already listening to the podcast. If not, there's also, Jonathan has a blog online that covers 60 doctrine that people can read. And those 60 doctrine, you talk about this is my new strategy when people say, like, I'm looking to get into reading the Bible. My strategy is I would start by reading this blog. Take 60 days, read one chapter or one doctrine a day. And it has all the biblical support in it too. So you are reading Bible along with it. But each doctrine, when you get that understanding, that's where, if you read those 60 doctrine before you read the Bible, the first time you read the Bible, it's going to be like the fifth time you've read the Bible, at least, at minimum. So that's one of the things. Like, so much of this comes down to understanding doctrine about God. And then I'd also, you know, you could reach out and we can help you get plugged in to figure out what your uniqueness is and all that stuff as well. So we have tons of resources. Aside from the podcast is just one of the resources we have. We have tons. So my advice, apart from all that stuff, there's no one on the planet these days that has access to the internet that can't reach out to us. Reach out and we'll point you in the right direction.
100% agree. There is nothing that needs to stop anybody who needs help reaching out to us, because that's why we did our podcast. We're trying to reach more people. Yeah. Joel and I are not too busy to help someone who needs help and who has nobody in their life to help them.
Right.
So I think there are, like Joel said perfectly, we have so many resources to help so many different people in so many different areas. We're just up to our eyeballs and stuff.
Yeah.
So we would love to be able to give more resources to people and to be a resource to them.
Wow, that's incredible. And I can share, you know, on myself, I thank you guys so much for the help that I've received from you guys over the years. And I honestly didn't even think, as I was prepping, about the doctrine blog. And I can remember, you know, early in the days of trying to understand doctrine, just how helpful that resource was. And even more so than just here's the doctrine, here's the definition, but an entire support of biblical text with commentary to help us understand why this definition applies in this specific thing. And you're right, it transformed reading the Bible. Just incredible. And it actually causes this doctrine to be pulled out. And, you know, I can share my own experience of just like starting to hear God's voice even better once I start to understand that language. And to that listener who's listening now, I would challenge you, take these guys up on their offer, reach out, you know, prove them wrong, reach out, see if they can help or not. And I know without a doubt, they're going to be drawn on God. They're going to be trying to figure out what his truth is and how it applies in your life. So, gentlemen, thank you again.
That challenge was totally worth the whole interview.
Yeah, man,
Jake.
for real. That's awesome. Great.
Prove them
Love
wrong.
It. Yeah,
Right.
prove us
Awesome.
wrong. Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you so much again for joining on Just Hang. It's been a great time.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
It's been a great hang, Jake. Thanks, man.